And so the asanas are the seats or the positions that we sit in for meditation.
Okay, so now I was told previously that in yoga, when we use the word yogasana, each of the asanas, each of the seats is a seat of awareness. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I would further agree that the seat of awareness is only one seat because there's only one awareness. And so as we do different postures, even though we're changing our body into different shapes, the awareness always remains as awareness. And so one of the tricks of the world of manifestation is that we identify with changing forms. I'm identifying with the changing form of my body or my life circumstances. And with the asanas, what we do is we say, okay, forms change, but consciousness doesn't, awareness doesn't. So can I remain in all of these different forms and still only be in that one thread of awareness, regardless of what my body is doing?
So this is beautiful because then it also implies that awareness is intrinsically free of the forms it takes, or the shapes it takes, or the experiences it is aware of or embodies. Asana gives us the experience of yogashta kuru karmani, established in awareness, in being, perform action, because these asanas moving from one to the other is an action and is also an experience. But even as the experience shifts, the form shifts, the phenomenon shifts, awareness remains independent, which means free. Is then yogasana, or the practice of yogasana, would we call it kriya? Because there's no karma involved. Karma is the binding action of anything that binds consciousness or imprisons consciousness into a particular attachment to a particular experience is karma, basically. So are we, by practicing yogasana, are we actually overriding karma?
Well, I guess it depends on the intention that we bring to the practice and what it is that we're hoping to gain from it. Um, the topic of asana has a lot of different, I guess you could say, subcategories to it. So when we look at the science, quote unquote, science of asanas from the yogic perspective, we have these five bodies that you and I are going to talk about at a later date. In one of the bodies, we have the prana nadis, or the pathways of energy that are flowing. And so prana comes from the word that which causes things to move or manifest. And in these prana nadis, it's not free flowing energy or free flowing awareness, but there are tons of little knots called granthis. And the knots are the things that are tying us down to our perceived existence as a form, as a body, as a name, as a profession, whatever it might be. So it's said that there are 72,000 nadis, of course, many, many more than those. And the yogis say in almost all of them have knots in them. And those knots are where, when our energy is not free flowing, where we begin to identify with that blockage, with that knot. So one of those blockages might be, I think I'm my body. I think I'm my name. I think I'm my occupation. I think that I am my political beliefs. And all of these things that we hold on to, they're knots, they're granthis. And so through the asanas, we begin the first stage of untying all of the knots so that prana and awareness flows freely, unimpeded. So on one level, the asanas are really important to untie those knots. So how do you untie a knot? You play around with the string and you move it this way, you move it that way, and then finally you can straighten it out. So in an asana, like we turn one way, we turn the other way, and then we come back and we're straight. And then we feel like established. So we actually are physically with the body and with the breath working on the granthis, working on these knots. And I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on these knots and what they are and how we get bound by them.
Well, now I'm learning as I speak to you, but I'm fascinated by the fact that um, you know in Eastern wisdom traditions, including Vedanta, but also Kashmir Shaivism, and also certain aspects of Buddhism, the basic understanding is that consciousness or awareness or our personal being, Jivatman, or at least the Atman part of it, is independent of all experience if we choose it, if we choose to understand that. And that experience or the bondage to experience creates karma, which then recycles as the body. So, in many of my conversations with Buddhists, for example, they refer to the physical body as the pain body or the pain and pleasure body or the karmic body. And, in my own experience, meditation, whatever, when you close your eyes and let's say, there's an internal dialogue going on all the time, right? There's a conversation. Somebody's having a conversation with themselves all the time. All you have to do is close your eyes and that you become aware of that conversation. And the conversation is mainly, of course, thoughts which are stories about the past. Okay, every thought is a story. Every thought is a story. And so let's say right now I'm closing my eyes and I'm remembering a story of intense distress. I was in such and such place and I was walking down the street in Manhattan. I witnessed an accident. I watched somebody get injured, and there was ambulances coming along, and somebody died, etc. And as I remember that, and that's a thought, but the thought is also a story. It's tied to images in my consciousness, and then it evokes emotions. So my thoughts, my sensations, my perceptions, my memories, my imagination, they're all participating in this internal dialogue. You can't have a thought without an accompanying sensation. In this case, a knot in the stomach or a knot in the heart, remembering the distress that I experienced. And then, suddenly I have a switch in memory. I suddenly think of my mother and, me as a little boy lying in her lap and remembering her telling me stories and singing songs. And as soon as I have that thought, suddenly different images come. I see her face, I can hear her voice. Sometimes I can even smell her skin as the thought. And I feel the emotions, and again, the entanglement of a story. Okay. And all these stories, then I feel in my body, because what do they do? These stories generate sensations, impressions from the past, imagination, emotions, thoughts, and each story has a karmic imprint, a knot. So these knots are karmic bondages. And through yoga, and we're untying them, as I understand, Kriya is that action that doesn't bind you, that frees you up from these knots. So is yoga and yogasana, aside from these wonderful physiological and biological effects, which is what people go there, they look better, the body looks better, it gets better shape and all that, and it's wonderful. But as you're removing these knots, you're getting also deeper into the subtle body, and then those knots, the physical knots are a projection of the subtle knots in the subtle body. Would that be a fair thing? Because I want to stay with the theme that yoga is for enlightenment. Doesn't matter what aspect of yoga we are doing. This seems very physical, okay? But of course, you and I, especially learning from you, all these movements, whether it's warrior pose and cat cow pose or whatever, and a happy baby, etc. They all have names. They're all associated with a certain mood or a motif or a name of an animal, which is supposed to trigger some kind of experience. And they all actually trigger a particular aspect of the subtle body. The goal always of yoga is oneness, getting in touch with the source. So when I combine yogasana with uh, which we do, right? With breath work, with drishti, with focused awareness, with awareness actually of the particular knot in the body or particular part of the body. I am actually dissolving karma in those parts of the body, even though it's a physical thing, that the imprint is caused by a subtle blockage.
Well, yeah. First of all, I think that, yes, I agree with you completely on the idea of kriya, karma, and subtle manifesting is physical. So we have been referring to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras quite a lot so far. So I'll just go back to Patanjali to begin discussing this further with you. The opening sutra of chapter 2 says, Tapas Swadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhanani Kriya Yoga. What are the kriyas or the actions within yoga sadhana? Yoga sadhana, meaning sadhana is a means for attainment of liberation. So these ingredients are tapas, which are things that are often associated with physical practices, like asanas and pranayama, yama, niyama, and swadhyaya, often associated with chanting, repetition of mantra, and self-examination, and Ishvara Pranidhana, which is associated with surrender to divinity, and in whatever form you might have faith in. Now, tapas as the practices, including things like asanas and pranayama, doesn't mean that to practice asana and pranayama is a tapas. What it means is that, according to some, that the word tapas, which means to cook or to heat, refers to, as Sri Krishnamacharya said, it's a ripening. And so we want to begin to ripen ourselves like a piece of fruit, or like the cucumber in the Mahamrityunjaya mantra, which is just ready to fall away from the creeper when it's completely ripened. So that the final moment of liberation is not effortful, but that you have completely ripened yourself. So now you're ready. And ripening or heating is also the analogy we see in the text quite often, is that of a pot, that the potter will mold the pot until the shape is basically what he or she wants it to be. And then they put it in the kiln to heat it. And only when it's heated and cooked can it hold water or milk or curd or whatever you're going to put in it, soup, anything. But if you don't cook the pot, then as soon as you put water in it, the clay is going to melt and everything's going to leak out. So the process of tapas is the process of both ripening ourselves, preparing ourselves for the deeper practices of yoga, and at the same time preparing our vessel, the body, the mind, the nervous system, so that we can hold the energy and hold the new experiences that are going to come to us from our inner work, because it's not difficult to gain energy. It's not even that difficult to attain small little siddhis or powers from practicing yoga. They come pretty quickly when you dedicate yourself to them. And one of the analogies which is given is that It's not always that hard to earn money, but in fact, you usually have to put more effort into earning it, but then you spend it really quickly. So it's not that hard to save, but it's hard to hold on to it because there's a temptation to save. And what happens with yoga is you make some progress, and then you might spend that progress by resorting to old habits or whatever. But by heating the pot and making sure the pot is firm, we can hold that experience, we can hold that energy and not waste it, not give it all away. And so that's tapas. And there's one more thing about tapas, which is that it's an attitude we have towards the practices that we're doing. That I'm going to do something challenging because the challenge is good for me. Challenging myself is going to help me to grow. It's going to help me to think deeper, and it's going to push me a little. So I'm going to challenge myself, but in a positive way. I'm not going to let it cause any, as Hari Harananda says, cause pathological disturbances in me by overdoing it. I'm just going to strengthen my body, strengthen my nervous system, strengthen my capacity to be present through challenge, and having that attitude towards our spiritual development, including all of the practices we do, is tapas. It's a positive attitude of, similar to what could be, Carolyn Dweck has the growth mindset, and there's another mindset called the stress mindset, also came out from Stanford. And the stress mindset is the way that you perceive stress is the way that your nervous system is going to respond to it. And if you perceive stress as being something bad for you, then your nervous system will respond with fight or flight. But if you perceive this stress as something which is beneficial to you, then your nervous system will respond in a way saying, okay, this is going to help me grow. And you will rise to the challenge, bite off only as much as you can chew. And then when it becomes too much, because your perception is clear now, you know when to say, you know what, this is a little too much for me right now. I need to back away, rather than getting overwhelmed by this immediate idea that all stress is bad. So tapas is a kind of a stress mindset where you say, you know what, a little bit of friction, a little bit of heat, the heat of tapas, a little bit is good because that's going to fire my pot. And then I'm ready. So that's the first thing about the kriyas. And the second thing, swadhyaya, either repeating mantras, you cover that in depth in total meditation. So I won't go into that now. People can just read total meditation to find out all about mantras. And self-examination. You have to examine yourself. Am I really being present, or am I being greedy? Am I being ambitious with my practices? Am I using these practices to gain fame or money or power over people? Or am I using them for compassion, kindness, love, transformation, liberation? And so that's honesty. That's applying honesty and questioning ourselves. Where am I really? And then Ishvara Pranidhana is the aspect of surrender, of the outcomes of our actions. And so when we talk about asanas or yoga in general, dealing with karma, then this is certainly one of the many places where the subject of karma is dealt with. If we perform an action with an expectation of an outcome, that will create a karmic predicament for us. If we have an interaction with anybody and we have an expectation of an outcome of ours to be met, it will cause conflict. And that conflict is a type of a karmic predicament also. The engagement in the interaction with people or with our body or with an asana, with total presence, without the expectation of a particular outcome, frees us from future karma being collected. Because whatever happens, happens, but we know we tried our best. We showed up for it. And so the performance of action without the expectation of an outcome, a result, or a reward is a definition, one of the definitions by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita of what is karma. Karmanyevadhikaraste ma paleshu kadachana. Ma karma palaheturbur mate swangos karmani. Your jurisdiction, Arjuna, is to action alone, but not to the fruits of action. Karmanyevadhikaraste. To action alone, but not to the fruits. Surrender the fruits to me. Let go of the expectation. And then you will be living in accordance with your purpose in life. And to live in accordance with your purpose, with the meaning in your life of your birth, means that when you're totally in alignment with that, you will not be creating more karmas that lead you away from your purpose, but you'll continue to live in alignment.
Well, it seems like these practices then are leading to even tapas in the way you explained it. Gives me the impression that it's all very practical, leading to maximum economy of expenditure of energy. You know, one of the laws that spiritual laws: do less, accomplish more, ultimately do nothing, accomplish everything.
Yeah.
This is the root. Tapas is the root. So, how many asanas are there? I mean, you know, I do a routine with about 35 asanas: lying, sitting, twisting, standing, um, forward bends, backward bends. And basically, through a particular routine, about say 35, I think what you've done is stimulated almost every branch of the autonomic nervous system for self regulation in the body. Um, how many asanas are there? I mean, I've looked at all these different schools, and obviously there are many, innumerable. I mean, just holding a book in my hand this big, full of asanas. But a regular routine, mine say there are 35: lying, sitting, twists, standing, forward bends, backward bends. Is that basically the complete process, or is there more to it?
Well, have you seen that Shiva Samhita? It's
Yes.
okay. So in Shiva Samhita, this is a conversation between Lord Shiva and Parvati and some questioners, and um, in that text, it might even be in Kedanda Samhita. I think it's Kedanda Samhita or Shiva Samhita. Shiva says there are um, 84 lakh, and a lakh is 100,000, 84 lakh asanas, as many as there are species in the world.
Wow.
And
That's
so
very
that would,
intelligent, very interesting, right? Because each species has its own asanas too,
yeah.
right?
And so
Sits.
84 lakh is 84 million. No, 8.4 million.
Yeah. It,
8.4 million. And so what's interesting about that is that, the latest scientific figures have estimated that there are 8.7 million eukaryotic species on the planet, of which, of course, we are eukaryotes. Eukaryotes. I said that with the
cells
Sanskrit
with a
accent.
nucleus, cells with a nucleus.
Exactly. So, this Samhita wasn't far off from what they're saying now in terms of species. And further, those are broken down into 4 categories in the text. And in the Bhagavatam, they discuss what these 4 categories are. And they're very similar to the categories of the eukaryotes: animal kingdom, fungi, plant, and one other, I can't remember, bacteria. So anyway, 8.4 million asanas, one for each species on the planet. Of those, 84 are very important to do, and these are called the 84 important asanas. And then of those 84, it's broken down to like another 12 that you really should do. And then at the end, there's 4 that are really important. And these are Siddhasana, Padmasana, Vajrasana, I think, and one other seated position. So Bhadrasana. And then at the end, Padmasana is the best of all of them because it's the seated pose. So from the yogic traditions, especially the Hatha Yoga traditions, this is the ultimate number, 8.4 million. In the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, we see 15 poses. In the Hidanda Samhita, there's something like 34 or 35 that are given. Yoga Sutra, the commentary by Shankaracharya, discusses 11 different asanas. Um, the Hathabhyasa Paddhati discusses 112 different asanas and breaks them into the categories that you discussed. So I think that there's a lot of discussion these days about, well, what's the real tradition and what are the real asanas and all that. And this is a very Western modality way of looking at it. But in the Indic tradition, asanas exist. And they are, as you said, the seats of awareness. And how many are there? A lot of them. How many should you do? Enough until you know who you are and your body is functioning well enough to carry you through your life. And the variety is going to be endless, just like mantras are endless. The varieties of asanas, there's so many they haven't even been written down.
So, talk to me a little bit about the relationship of yogasana, and we can do pranayam later. We'll talk
Mm,
about it, but yogasana and and the vagus nerve. What's
mhm.
the connection
Sure.
between the practice of yogasana and what we're discovering about vagal tone and healing and all that?
And by the way, I'm sorry if that answer I just gave was a terribly evasive answer, but
No, no, I
yeah,
totally get it. I mean,
yeah,
the fact is, I'm not such an expert, but as I get into these asanas, especially the ones named after other species, I have this strange awakening of what it might be to experience life with that seat of awareness, and it's a very life altering revelation that even my moods and my feelings and my emotions and my insights and my intuition is linked to seats of awareness, which is amazing to me. I feel quite liberated in the fact that asana is not only physical resiliency but emotional and psychological flexibility. And one of my favorite quotes, I don't know where it came from, but I heard it from Maharishi, was infinite flexibility is the secret of immortality. And if in the non-dual traditions, everything is consciousness. This microphone is a manifestation of consciousness. What else is it? It's a modified perception, so it's consciousness. Very solid, seemingly not flexible, but actually even this form is a phenomenon. So I'm getting a lot from our yogasana in terms of understanding the range of resilience and possibilities and flexibility, not only in the physical body, which I experience by looking at my body, but then I experience it emotionally, I experience it psychologically. And I also see that, awareness itself is infinite possibilities, infinite resiliency, and infinite manifestations of experience, from the experience of a microphone to the experience of a hummingbird. I mean, that's all very fascinating to me once you start understanding everything in terms of consciousness. So that was very good, what you just explained to me. But let's go to the Vegas now for
yeah.
another few minutes.
But can I just I'd like to add one more thing if I
Yeah.
can to what you just said, because I think it's really important point. There are all of these asanas with these different names, and we're imitating these shapes. That's purposeful. That's deliberate. It's not just that the rishis thought, oh, it'll be fun to pretend to be a turtle or a tortoise. Why is it called Kurmasana? In Gita, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Yadasam harate chayam kurmonganiva sarvashaha indriyan indriyartebhyas tasya prajna pratishtata. So the person of steady wisdom who's established in prajna, in wisdom and in insight, they draw their sense organs into themselves like a turtle withdraws its arms and legs into its shell. And then we see this kurmasana asana where we're doing the same thing. We're putting ourselves like a turtle and then we bind our hands back and cross our feet. And this is supposed to symbolize the withdrawal of the limbs into the hard shell. And So what are some other interesting things about a tortoise? Well, human beings breathe 15 to 18 times per minute, 21,600 times a day. We live maybe 100 years at best, 90 to 100. A tortoise breathes about 4 times a minute and lives 300 to 400 years or so, at its best. So, and the yogis are very concerned with slowing down the breath because that will lengthen our pranic storehouse of life. So therefore, if you want to lengthen your breath, lengthen your life, breathe like a turtle. Slow your breath down to 4 times per minute. So they're all, and then there's a bhavana, there's a feeling or emotion associated with every asana we should be doing. So it's said that without bhavana, without this feeling, um, you know, yoga is not, the asanas won't be fulfilled, pranayama won't be fulfilled, meditation won't be fulfilled, devotion won't be fulfilled if it's mechanical and cold. We need to have this bhavana, this feeling that you just discussed. It needs to infuse us with feeling, with experience, with love and gratitude and appreciation for perceiving, even if we imagine it for a little while, what would it be like to be this other creature? What would it be like to be like a tree? What would it be like to be like a mountain? How does a mountain sit to meditate? What's the purpose of a cloud? The highest samadhi in Yoga Sutra is Dharma Megha Samadhi, the cloud of Dharma. Well, why is Dharma like a cloud? How do you meditate on a cloud? So there are all these like hints given in these texts, like be like this other being for a little while, see what happens, see how you change. And so I think it's very interesting what you just said, and that's what it made me think about. So onto the vagus nerve. Um, how do the asanas affect the parasympathetic nervous system, which the vagus nerve largely is 80% of? Um, so there are a bunch of different things that are happening. I'm a big fan of the way Stephen Porges has described uh, the ways that different practices in religious traditions are affecting vagal tone. And he identified 4 things that were common. He wasn't specifically talking about yoga. He was talking about prostrations in Buddhism, whirling dervishes, prostrations in Islam, davening in Judaism, that there's 4 things associated with them. Number 1, breathing, rhythmic breathing. Number 2, there is vocalization. Number 3, there's posture. And number 4, there's behavior. And so very briefly, regulated breathing, like if the abdomen is moving rhythmically in and out, it's sending messages from the abdominal viscera through the vagus nerves up to the brain of rhythmicity, safety, steadiness, dependability, that everything is calm and even. Vocalization is going to stimulate the vagal nerves in the area of the trachea. And these include humming pranayamas like Brahmari, Ujjayi pranayama, as well as chanting or singing, or even humming sounds that people do to self-soothe, are going to calm these messages being sent in the vagus nerve, which of course is going to downregulate inflammation and upregulate feelings of safety and connection. The next is posture. He said that through all these different movements of postures, we are stimulating the baroreceptors wrapped around the carotid arteries in the neck. This is one of the things occurring, of course, not the only thing. And that's going to help to balance and steady blood pressure. And then through behavior, that kindness and appreciation, gratitude have been shown to improve vagal tone, and anxiety and anger weaken vagal tone and heart rate variability. And then there's one other important part too, which is that if we look at all of the asanas, pretty much all of them, and we say, okay, if I twist this way, I'm putting some pressure on the liver and opening the spleen. And if I twist this way, I'm doing the opposite. When I bend this way and put my elbows here, massaging my stomach and my abdomen. When I arch back, I'm opening the lungs and the heart. When I'm breathing, I'm exercising all of it. And all of these visceral organs, the organs of the upper chest and the organs of the abdomen or the thoracic and abdominal cavities, these are all organs that are end recipients of the vagus nerve stimulation. So that when we stimulate these organs with positive, deliberate pressure through the asanas, it's sending those messages up to the brain as well to say, we're being paid attention to. Everything is being balanced and taken care of. And then our homeostatic response of restoring balance in the body feels supported and happy, and it begins to repair the things that it needs to repair. So those are a few things that are occurring.
Well, that's very interesting because, as a medical doctor, when you go to medical school, we learn about everything in compartments: the GI system, the cardiovascular system, the endocrine system, the nervous system. Um, but as far as I can remember, I never learned anything about the healing system. And what we are
Wow.
actually stimulating right now is the healing system
Yeah.
with the yogasana. So, what I'd like to do is, since we've been talking now for 45 minutes almost just on asana, I'd like to conclude this session and let's just call it yoga asana, or yoga and the healing system, or asana and the healing system, yogasana and the healing system. And then I think we need to continue this conversation on just yogasana, extending it to bandhas and kriyas and interoception, and linking it as we go along with pranayam, pratyahara, dharana, dhyan, samadhi, to see how asana actually is a pivot around which all these things also revolve in a sense. The asana practice is the physical aspect of all these different limbs of yoga. And I'd just like to continue next time on maybe identifying a few asanas, opening and what they do, identifying some of the principal asanas, the three bandhas, and seeing how that actually amplifies the healing response in the healing system. So for today, I think if you're okay, we'll just call this yogasana and the healing system.
Beautiful.
And then next time we continue. I think we can continue on yoga asana for a few sessions before we move on, because there's so much here to say and to learn. And for me, this is a great opportunity to expand my awareness of yoga asana.
Mhm. I think that would be great. And I think the idea to talk about mudras and bandhas uh,
Yes.
is really good because the parasympathetic nerves of the sacral region are largely ignored. And that's what Mula Bandha and Ashwini Mudra and Uddiyana Bandha is stimulating, these sacral parasympathetic nerves. People always remember these ones up here, but they're not paying attention like, okay, what's happening below?
Yeah, it'll be fun to do that, explore all the bandhas, the
Yeah.
kriyas, and see how that integrates with. Now we have a new
Yeah.
thing to explore, the healing system.
It's amazing. I love that. If do you want to pick like 5 asanas that you want to talk about, your 5 favorite?
Yeah, well, let's one that I do even after I've done my program in the morning, in the evening. I do about 5-10 sessions of just Surya Namaskar, which accompanies everything. So we can talk about that maybe, and then talk about the bandhas and talk about opening the heart. Oh, you decide. But few things that give people a glimpse that we influence through consciousness everything that's happening in our body. And in the Western world, as a student of physiology and anatomy, we never really focused on the autonomic nervous system and self-regulation. The only time we talked about the autonomic nervous system was sympathetic overdrive, stress, this, that. But actually, the autonomic nervous system is our gateway to both the subtle body and ultimately the source of all experience, which is pure consciousness. So I'd like to explore asana more with you.
Cool. Awesome. I mean, yeah, the autonomic nervous system is almost the only thing the yogis were talking about in regard to practices.
And all these
Yeah.
powers, so-called siddhis, regulating body temperature,
Mhm.
influencing heart rate, influencing breathing, but also it goes deeper. You can influence every organ in the body. You can influence your moods. You can influence your the sensations you want to achieve. In this is the problem with what I realized earlier on because of my scientific training. I was convinced that, a thought like lift your arm is very powerful. It starts with a thought and it ends up with lifting the arm or, or lifting a car in a case of an emergency, or you start with a thought, you can fly an airplane. So you see the evidence of motor activity, but you never see direct evidence of sensory uh, attention. Say in yoga nidra, for example, I'm just putting my awareness in different parts of my body and I don't really feel anything. And yet, if I did an EEG or a PET scan, I'll see that every aspect of attention and sensory awareness triggers a neural response. And I can rewire my whole brain by just paying attention, which we call interoception, but which is actually a combination of pratyahara and bandha and yogasana and pranayam. It should be possible to self-regulate every aspect of the physical body, the subtle body, and ultimately have source to access to the source of existence, which is the source of all experience. So for me, this has opened up a whole window or understanding some very basic ways to self-regulate the body, but then go deeper into what we read about the siddhis, we read about the riddhis, and I say, oh, this is very interesting. It almost sounds mythical, but it's not actually. You're opening up dormant potentials that exist in anybody who has self-awareness, and these dormant potentials exist in everyone. The difference between, say, what a regular human being is and a yogi is, yogis are meta humans because they're not bamboozled by the hypnosis of social conditioning and the limitations of what society tells us is possible and what is not possible. But when you go into the nature of these processes, you understand that so-called supernormal powers are just dormant, non-local potentials that we have ignored because we are so restricted in our understanding of what is possible and what is not possible, especially if you identify with your body as an independent object, a physical thing, which is, in fact, a modulation of consciousness, then you can go all the way. So I'd like to explore, even as we go further, let's together explore supernormal powers, siddhis, riddhis, self regulation, healing, insight, intuition, imagination. It's a miracle that we can, at the flicker of a thought, evoke an image in our mind. Flicker of a thought, evoke a sensation in our body. Flicker of a thought, evoke a whole story. And this is the karmic imprint of all that. And I have right now, this is the signature of life and its stories, which we call karma. Karma is nothing other than stories we are attached to. And I'm finding that yoga is helping me liberate me from my stories. And that's a very interesting thing to begin to comprehend that, I thought I was doing a posture, and here I am discovering the divine.
Yeah,
That's unbelievable, right? So let's explore. Let's end today yogasana and the healing system. And we've made a good start.
beautiful.
Thank you.